All right, class. So this week we're talking about accommodations and hospitality services in tourism. What are we talking about here? Accommodation is nothing more than lodging, people spending the night somewhere. And hospitality services, we're talking about all the other hospitality stuff, food and beverage, events, all these different things, how they are related to the tourism industry. All right, that's what we're going to be talking about. Okay, so the hospitality sector, all right, is the very essence of tourism, involving the consumption of food, drink, accommodation, and is in an environment away from the normal home base. All right, so what we're talking about is, yes, we have tours, we have hospitality in a home base, but we also have hospitality far away from home. It's even more important far away from home because you can't just go home and use your own refrigerator, your own food or whatever, and sleep in your own bed. You have to, because you're not in your home base, you have to partake in or take advantage of the hospitality sectors. Okay? So what are some of the things you do? Restaurants, cafes, and catering places, public houses, canteens, camping and RV parks, hotels, vacation camps, short stay tourist accommodations, and events venues, and many, many others. Most of these terms are from our textbook, which is European in nature, so the terminology is a little different. I tried to Americanize it a little bit, but it is still somewhat more European. All right, so that's the hospitality sector. That's all we're really going to talk about, anything other than the specific lodging sector within the hospitality. All right, within hospitality. All right. Okay, so tourist accommodations, service. We have two types we're going to talk about. We have serviced and non-service. Now, as with anything in the modern world, the lines have blurred a little bit here and there. Okay, but with service and non-service, service is fully furnished accommodations for short-term stays. The services provided include things like residential-like amenities, like utilities, internet, housekeeping, things like that. All right. So examples would be hotels, resort hotels, airport hotels, inns, motels, bed and breakfast, apartment hotels. Again, like I said, I think in the previous slide, the lines have blurred for a lot of these different classifications of hotels. Some of the classes that we teach here at Cape Fear, we speak about the different types and the classifications of hotels. We classify many different ways, by size, by service, by price, by location, whatever. There's many different ways, but in the modern world, everybody's trying to find a competitive edge. So many establishments have features of multiple different types or whatever. So it is good to understand the different things that are out there, but at the same time, every property is going to be different, and many properties are going to have aspects of one thing that you would expect that if they have this, they should have that, and they might not because they're catering to a specific market. All right. But motels, inns, airport hotels, resort hotels, and hotels, pretty much similar, except with the different services. Of course, the airport is one that is classified by its location, its proximity to the airport. Motels are very low service, hotels are very high service, resorts are high service and high luxury, but also their big distinctions between a regular hotel and a resort hotel is the amenity. All right, amenity being the thing, like the ski resort or the ski slopes or the golf course or the beach, right? And also their ownership is a little different. When I say ownership, I'm talking about the ownership from the guest. The guests in many resorts, there's much more options for actual ownership. Timeshares where you own a piece of the room, condominium where you own the room, and then you have vacation clubs, which is sort of like timeshares, but it's slightly different. And then you have people who own standalone properties on a resort. All right, vacation homes on a resort. All right, so, but the ones that are going to be a little bit different are the one that I find the most fascinating, and it is different. And it's very, very prominent in Europe is bed and breakfasts. Bed and breakfasts are nothing more than somebody's home. A large home, 4 or 5 different rooms not being used by the family. They find people in a room. They have autonomy in that room, but they are guests in somebody's home, and they share meals, usually just breakfast. But so those are a little different. Okay, but those are some of the things that some of the accommodations that you can find as serviced accommodations for tourists. Now we're going to talk about non-serviced. Okay, so non-serviced, you're going to have things like campsites. Geets is a very unique type of holiday rental home in France, where it's completely unserviced. Vacation cottages, villas, those are still places where you rent it, but you rent it for extended periods, and they're very little service or no service, or unserviced completely. Then you have things like youth hostels, backpacker hostels, and RVs. Now, hostels are basically just very minimum service, meaning that they might have a bed, or some backpacker hostels don't even have beds. Sometimes they just have platforms where everybody puts their sleeping bag. All right, and they're just places to stay, coming out of the rain, coming out of the cold. Very, very low service. There's nothing going on there, but they're very cheap. All right, I've actually stayed at a backpacker hostel in the Bavarian Alps, where we climbed the Zugsprig, which is a mountain, and halfway up, or 3/4 of the way up, we spent the night at a hostel. And it was neat because it was basically just these big rooms where you just lay your sleeping bag on these platforms. And they were like bunk beds, but they were just platforms that were 20 feet wide. And then they were, maybe 2 feet, 4 feet above each other, and several high. And people were just packed in there with the sleeping bags. It was an experience. And then, but they did have a like a meeting place where they offered food and stuff, and alcohol, which at 10,000 feet, I don't recommend it. Anyway, I could get really sick. All right, so moving forward. That was a bunny trail, wasn't it? All right. So self-catering, though, if we're talking about that as a category, which is private, independent lodging. All right. Self-catering. All right. That's the definition of non-serviced. Okay. So let's move forward. Okay. So other things, characteristics of accommodations, tourist accommodations. It's very seasonal. All right. Occupancy levels are going to be very varied. They're going to be very high, almost full. You can expect occupancy levels for in-season times of the popular tourist destinations. The occupancy level is going to be high. They're almost full, generally full the entire season. And then they go very low. All right. Location, they're going to be located where the tourist attractions or the tourist destinations are. All right. The grading systems are going to be different. What I mean by that is in the United States, in some states or some sectors, or the United States as a whole, there's different grading systems as far as 3-star hotel, 4-star hotel, AAA endorsements, stuff like that. There's a lot of different wide range of grading systems. There's a wide range of types of property too. Okay. And one thing about them that we have to understand is they have a high fixed rate, high fixed cost. What does that mean? Okay. Hotels are very expensive to buy and to create and build and operate. All right. So they have fixed costs, and those fixed costs is that cost that doesn't change with the fluctuation of the business that you're doing. Variable cost, yes, our variable cost is going to be really high during the busy season. Variable cost for things like labor and food, that's going to be very high because we're buying more of it to support more revenue. All right, but fixed cost, we pay that whether we have 99% occupancy or 10% occupancy or 0% occupancy. We still have to pay for our mortgage. We have to pay for taxes. We have to pay for insurances. We have to pay those fixed costs irregardless. And it's very high. So what does that mean? It means that the room rates are going to be high enough for during the periods that we have high occupancy in order to cover those costs throughout the entire year. So those of you who are not familiar with it, that's what revenue management is. It's taking that into account when you're determining room rates. Okay. So another thing about tourist accommodations or accommodations in general is they're subject to numerous regulations, a lot of regulations, right? A lot of regulations for hotels and for anything, right? All kinds of accommodations. You have to be subject to regulations. All right. So some trends. Internationalization. That's hard for me to say. Internationalization. Basically, especially in Europe, you have a lot of fluctuation between the borders now. People can come and go, not as they please, but certainly less restricted than they used to. Sometimes maybe as they please. But the world's getting smaller. Okay. And then the next one we're going to talk about is disruptive innovations such as Airbnb. Airbnb. All right. 10, 15, 20 years ago, Airbnb was a nightmare for the lodging industry. All right. It's part of what's called the sharing economy. The sharing economy is outside the mainstream of, established industries like lodging. And what happened with that is it was a way for people to rent spaces in their home without having to worry about regulations and stuff like that. And one of the biggest innovations about Airbnb was its reservation system, which Airbnb was a company that offered a website that was full service that enabled this to work. All right. Now, prior to Airbnb, the level of effectiveness of online presence of the lodging industry wasn't that great. All right. Airbnb forced their hands. Airbnb, that was one of the bigger advantages, is the online. Now every place is online just as well, if not better, than Airbnb. And then the other advantage of Airbnb was it was cheaper, generally speaking, because they didn't have to pay to meet all these regulations. Now, that's kind of sketchy, isn't it? I mean, if hotels have to spend a certain amount of money meeting regulations, which are intended to keep the population safe, and we say, well, if we got this alternate kind of economy here where we don't have to follow the rules, the public's not safe. All right. So it doesn't take long for governments and for municipalities to understand this. And, you could just say they do it to keep the public safe, or they could do it for just tax revenues or whatever. But it doesn't take long for these fringe things to become mainstream and have to be followed the same regulations and stuff like that, or variations of the same regulations that the hotels have to. Don't get me wrong, Airbnb and other things like that can be disruptive, but I think that the industry really, really rose up to meet those challenges, and I think Airbnb helped the industry. All right. So growth of non-services that goes along with Airbnb. People are more interested in going to campgrounds and stuff like RVs and stuff like that. Diverse ownership models. Especially in resorts, you're going to see those different ownerships, the timeshares and stuff like that. Increased use of technology. I briefly touched on that with Airbnb, but it's not only the technology for reservations or before the vacation. It's also during the vacation, the use of technology for guest service technologies, things in the room, smart rooms that can do all kinds of different stuff. New forms of demand, new open markets, and then increased competition. Competition is always coming. Whenever an industry starts making money, more people want to get into it. So that's basically it. That's all I really wanted to touch on. Read the chapters, there's a lot of good information, but it's basically centered on what we just talked about. All right. So that's it. I will see you the next time.